Hello, welcome back to another Pickleball Physio podcast where we talk about pickleball injury, prevention, recovery, and performance to keep pickleball athletes on the courts safe and confident so they can continue playing as many games as they can enjoy. I'm excited to welcome a special guest, Rhett Polka. I met Dr. Polka just a couple of months ago at a healthcare convention, Smart Success Healthcare Live, where many of the guests that you have been hearing lately have been coming from. And I'm very excited to have him come on as well, because we had a couple of conversations and I was able to watch him do some demos during the event where I got to learn and hear about some cool things that aren't really talked about super often in the healthcare community, more or less the physical therapy world. And I'm excited for him to bring that to our platform and into the pickleball world. So thank you, Rhett, for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sarah.
So Rhett is the owner of the 180 Physical Therapy Clinic in Loveland, Colorado, as well as a teacher and an educator in his patented 180 System Online. He's a keynote speaker, and he's also soon to be an author. What, if you wouldn't mind sharing, Rhett, what are you writing your book on?
So I actually submitted the first draft to the editor, and it's basically geared towards current medical professionals, people that are in, say, PT or chiropractic school right now, or people that are contemplating going into the medical field, specifically outpatient orthopedics. And the kind of the lay of the land, the way things work nowadays and how the system is broke. And in my belief and a lot of other people's belief, the way we fix this current disaster is to burn it down and start from scratch.
Agreed. Right. There's a lot that needs to be redone. And like we've even heard at, the Smart Success Healthcare Live, a lot of our models are 60 years old, and things have grown so much more since then, even over the last 5 years. For the listeners and for the people who maybe aren't as familiar with you and what you do, what are you focusing on as you go through this 180 system? What is the 180 system and what makes it so unique?
So quick overview of my background. I, much like other outpatient orthopedic physical therapists, got hurt playing sports when I was in junior high school, got interested in PT then, went through PT school, got out of PT school, was super excited to go to work in the field that I had dreamed of in sports medicine, got out into the field, and everything that everybody was doing in 2000 was the exact same thing they were doing in 1988 when I was in 9th grade. And I was like, what is going on here? So I started taking more classes, going to more conferences, trying to get certifications. I got certified in strength and conditioning. I'm certified in orthopedics, and it taught me absolutely nothing about how to be an elite clinician and how to get my patients better rather than giving my patients short-term symptom relief. So at that point, I was 6 months into my PT career, and I said, I either need to stop doing this altogether and just go be a strength coach and do something else, or I need to figure out if there's a better way to do this. So I spent the next 2 years sifting through research, going to more courses, and finally figured out that I had all of the information that I needed if I looked at my notes and I looked at my textbooks and all of that stuff. What I didn't have, and what they don't teach you in PT school, one of the thousands of things that they don't teach you in PT school, is how to apply the science that you're learning. So they teach you how to memorize all this stuff, right, and regurgitate it on a Scantron test, and then go study for boards and regurgitate more things that have absolutely nothing to do with evaluating and treating patients. Right. So when you get out into the field, you're not a clinician, you're a test taker. Right. So what I figured out was I could take the science that we learned and actually figure out a way to apply it to both evaluation and treatment, and I could get immediate results. And it didn't matter if my patient was a 65-year-old pickleball player or a 20-year-old football player or somebody who had a work comp injury or a auto injury. Everybody that's going to come into a PT clinic, outpatient PT clinic, is a human. So if we understand how to treat and assess human physiology to get to the root cause of their symptoms, their pain, their swelling, we can get everybody better really fast and they can stay better really long. Because my problem when I came out of school wasn't that I wasn't getting results. My patients felt better. They thought I was a nice guy. I told funny jokes, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, they had the exact same problem when they left my clinic as they did when they walked in. And many times when you go to see a physical therapist, you're actually worse than you were when you came in. And if you do the exercises and the stretches that they gave you, you're actually making yourself worse. So that's what I figured out. And I figured out that if I do the opposite of what everybody else is doing, a 180, then my patients get better. So that's when I started doing my own thing, opened my own clinic, had multiple clinics, multiple PTs, started teaching my course so I could help other physical therapists get out of the mess. So I think I've had like 50 people go through the course so far across the United States.
Right.
And we continue to grow. We're growing that way to help try to get our profession out of the mess and get people what they actually deserve when they go to see a medical expert.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that highlight that a lot of us, including myself, will find ourselves in that rut of, working with people and they feel better maybe by the end of it. And then they go home and they're still working with the same problem. They come back in the same spot, maybe a little bit worse, maybe a lot worse, sometimes a little bit better. And then sometimes people will just say, hey, I'm out of pain. Everything's gung-ho, good to go. And I don't need to come in anymore. So there's definitely a mentality and a paradigm shift that comes obviously with making this 180. What are some of those components that clinicians and your patients that you're educating, what are some of those components that you are opening their eyes to as being those missing pieces?
So there's some huge paradigm shifts that 180 is built on. One is we should not be worried about whether people feel better or whether they feel pain. Like if my patient comes in with 8/10 pain and they leave with 4/10 pain, that's okay as long as they have more range of motion, they have more strength, they could do things that they couldn't do before. And when they leave, from the time that they leave to the time they wake up the next morning, their pain, if I did the right thing on a physiological level, their pain should go down. The conventional model is get people in, cover up their symptoms, put tape on them, give them a rub down, hit them with a Theragun, give them some stretches, cover up all these symptoms, and then they get worse. So that is backwards. We should be worried about physiology, function on the physiological level, seeing what they can and can't do, and then making our focus function, not symptoms. So the first big paradigm shift is we are not pain experts. We are not here to take away your pain. We are here to figure out what the root cause of your functional deficit is, reverse that so your function goes up, and then your pain will go away. Then your swelling will go away, your range of motion will get bigger, all of that stuff. So first big thing is stop worrying about pain, stop assessing symptoms. So when we go to school, what do we learn? Special tests, goniometry, all the things that assess symptoms. Well, if the only thing I assess is symptoms, what do you think I'm going to be stuck treating? Symptoms. Right. So I don't assess special tests. I don't care about differential diagnosis. All I care about is on a functional screen, what can and can't you do? What angle was that joint in? Was that an eccentric or concentric contraction that should have been happening? Could you go through amortization? If you couldn't do that, what muscle is dysfunctional that is causing your instability, your pain, your swelling? If I can figure out that and reverse that, then I don't have to worry about covering up your symptoms.
Right. Because if you're able to address the root cause, then you wouldn't expect symptoms to return or stay the same or get worse. You'd expect it to get better because you're addressing whatever was irritating or aggravating those symptoms in the first place. So I imagine when people start coming in and you see them on their first visit or second visit, depending how many conversations you need to have with them, what are some of the questions that you encourage these people to start asking themselves in the times between seeing you when assessing their progress or assessing their ability to start getting back to their function?
Normally, the first question they ask, and when patients come in, the majority of our patients are referred by our patients. So I do no marketing. I don't buy Facebook ads. I don't take lunch to physicians. I do a great job, and my staff does a great job with our patients, and they send us patients. So when they come in, they've already got this mindset that we're going to do something different, but their friend really couldn't explain it. So you just have to go and experience it for yourself. So I don't tell them what I'm going to do. I don't say, I'm going to test your strength and I'm going to do this and I'm going to poke around here. And then all of a sudden everything's going to feel crazy good. I don't tell them anything. I just say, just let me do this. Boom, 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 boom. And they look at me, and the first question is, what the hell did you just do? And why didn't the physical therapist and the chiropractor and massage therapist and athletic trainer that I saw before you, why didn't they figure that out? And I say, because they're stuck in the conventional thought process. And unless you break out of that thought process, you will not understand this. There's a ton of patient education that goes into what we do so we can unravel all of the false narratives that they've been told.
Right.
But when you let them experience what inhibition or weakness feels like, and then you give them facilitation or strength immediately 10 seconds later, they understand something is going on that's totally different than anything they've done before. So the proof is in the pudding. So they experience, I can do this, and I couldn't do that 10 seconds ago. And then we always, no matter if it's the first visit or the fifth visit, we're always going to do a functional screen before every visit and after every visit, so they can see, I couldn't do this before, I can do this now. So, and all of that takes a half an hour. So if I can do a functional screen, break you down to your smallest component, find the root cause, reverse the root cause, get you up, do exercise, do patient education, and redo a functional screen, all in a half an hour, and give you more results than you got 3 times a week for 4 months with the other physical therapist, you're going to clue in and say, okay, I was doing the wrong thing before. I got to stay with this guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with this, results that you're able to get, this facilitation for the inhibition, weakness versus strength, can you give some of our listeners a little bit more of an idea of what we're actually talking about, what we're looking for when we look at facilitation versus inhibition, and what that looks like for a pickleball athlete?
For the layperson, so I would imagine you have people that are listening to this podcast that a lot of what I'm talking about is going over their head because they don't have medical background.
Right.
So here's how you know if you have something that's inhibited. You have tightness, you lack range of motion, you have instability. So if you're standing on one foot and you can't do a single leg squat without losing your balance, you most likely have inhibition. If you can't turn your head and look over your shoulder because your neck is tight, you most likely have inhibition. So all of the symptoms that people go see physical therapists for, a tight muscle, a muscle spasm, lack of range of motion, swelling, those are all telling you there is inhibition somewhere. A medical professional that understands how to get to the root cause, which is always neuromuscular inhibition, should be able to take what you're telling them and say, oh, you have tightness there? I need to assess everything to see why that one thing is compensating so much, because it doesn't have to be the tight muscle is the inhibited muscle. The tight muscle could be the muscle that is compensating so much for the inhibited muscle. So we have to go find those inhibited muscles and reverse the inhibition. So your symptoms, patient's symptoms, when they come in, are telling you they have inhibition. Unfortunately, the conventional medical model says, oh, well, they're telling me they're tight here, that means I rub that spot. Oh, they're telling me they're swollen here, I put ice on that spot. That spot rarely has anything to do with what they're actually coming in for.
Right. When people are coming in with this inhibition, a lot of times, or, on a subconscious level, everybody's saying, oh, yes, I'm tight, I need to stretch, or I'm weak, so I have to just work out this one muscle as hard as I can. I've heard you, talk about the difference between flexibility and mobility and stability and being able to get that controlled motion. And you've created something called mostrability. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about what that encompasses and how that is different than what everybody thinks about. Oh, it's tight, so I got to stretch. Oh, it's weak, I got to strengthen.
One of the real benefits that I had coming out of PT school is that I came out in a time that there was a lot of attention being addressed at stretching. So a lot of the research articles, JOSPT, all of the strength and conditioning journals had a lot of stuff that was being published on the effects of stretching.
Right.
So up until that point, the research was, if you stretch this muscle, can you increase this much range of motion? And I will tell you 100%, if you look at any research article that's done since the beginning of time that wants to say, does stretching increase range of motion? 100% it does.
Yeah.
Here's the catch. How?
Mm-hmm.
How does it increase range of motion? And what they started to finally publish in 2000, 2002 was that the reason why range of motion is increasing is because strength, muscle contraction, neuromuscular facilitation was all being sacrificed to gain the range of motion. So we had a lot of studies coming out showing that people that stretched had an increase in their 40-yard dash time. They had a decrease in their vertical jump. They had an increase in their injury rate. One of the best articles was written, they took a whole hundreds of new recruits for boot camp into the military and tested them for flexibility. Guess who had the hardest time getting out of boot camp without injuries? The most flexible recruits.
Right.
So flexibility, so let's make sure we're on the same page here as far as the definition of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
The definition of flexibility is the most amount of range of motion a joint can go through with or without external assistance.
Right.
Okay. Mobility came along with CrossFit and a lot of mobility WOD type stuff. I see it as kind of a garbage term for, it's not quite flexibility, but it's really not quite anything else either.
Mm-hmm.
So what I figured out as I was going through this was, we need to have joints that have motion. They have to go through a range of motion. We can't tell people, well, you're just going to be moving like a robot. So we have to have full range of motion, but we also need to have stability as we're going through the range of motion.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to have strength so we can get out of the range of motion. So if I go all the way here and I don't have the strength to come out of that motion, that's a bad idea. So
Right.
stretching, foam rolling, Theragun will get you here, but it won't get you back here, which is the major problem. So that's where I came up with motion, strength, and stability. Mostrability is more important than flexibility and mobility.
Agreed. That's something that we see a lot when it comes to injuries, is because people are expecting, these stretching activities to get them the motion that they need. But like you said, they'll go and they'll reach for that ball that's just past them, or they'll dash and they'll leap to the side or leap forward or leap backward, and their body's not ready to accept the demand, the challenge that poses, because they just have the motion available. They don't have the strength and stability to support them and to catch them and be able to power out of that in a skilled way for the shot that they're trying to make. When it comes to, pickleball athletes, I'd encourage a lot of you guys to think about that when the next time that you are saying, oh, I feel tight, I just need to stretch. Focus a little bit more on this concept of mostrability. Make sure that you're not just getting motion for motion's sake. You're building strength and stability to actually function in that range. With that, what are some of the common activities or common muscles that you tend to find get inhibited in general when you're seeing people that are more of the athletic type, doing a lot of multi-directional movement and some overhead activities?
When I have a patient in the clinic, I'm going to get extremely analytical. I'm going to break them down muscle by muscle and different heads of different muscles to figure out where the problem is. Now, for a pickleball player to do that to themselves would be absolutely impossible. It takes forever. They would be totally screwed up mentally and finally give up and just say, I'm going back to stretching. What those people in that demographic needs to understand is that you need to be doing a total body warm-up. So when you're taking time to stretch one muscle and then stretch another muscle and then stretch another muscle, you're taking a lot of time to make yourself worse. Mm-hmm. If you did things that were multi-joint, multi-plane, compound motion to get in and out of range of motion controlled, that's how you are teaching your body proprioceptively to fire in those positions. So when you do reach for that ball, your body can say, oh, I was just here. I know how to do that. I get out of that position. If you stretch, foam roll, Theragun to get into that position, now your body gets into that position and says, oh, I'm used to relaxing here. I don't want to get out of this position. And then you have to compensate to get out of that position. And that's where you have an injury. Or remember, and this is one of the things that I use for patient education. If you're listening to this and you don't have a medical background, do this exercise really quickly. Think to yourself how you would define a muscle. What is an easy, just overall definition for muscle? So when I ask my patients, usually they come back and they say, well, it's something that moves your joints, or it like pulls and it contracts to move things. And I say, okay, so would you agree with me that a quick and easy definition of a muscle is that it is a contractile tissue? And they'll say, sure. And I'll say, okay, so what happens when a muscle contracts? And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if my arm is here and my bicep contracts, what happened? And they say, oh, well, if your muscle contracts, then it moves the joint. I said, okay, my arm is not moving. Is my bicep contracting? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, okay, so it contracts to either move the joint or it contracts to stabilize the joint. So now apply that to a pickleball player who's lunging for a ball, and their quads and their hams and their calf have to stabilize their knee. They just spent 15 minutes turning all that stuff off. It can't stabilize their knee, and boom goes the ACL. Boom goes the meniscus. Boom goes the MCL. So that's how injuries happen. So the take-home message for your active and dynamic warm-up is that it has to be active and dynamic. Right. You should be moving in multiple planes. You should be getting in and out of ranges of motion that you plan on getting in and out of when you're playing pickleball or whatever your sport is. And that when you get done, you should feel warmed up. You should feel stiff, because stiff joints and stiff muscles not only create safe joints and safe muscles, but they also increase your performance. So I just worked with 2 PGA golfers yesterday, and I asked them, if I gave you the choice of having stiff joints or tight or loose joints, what would you like to have? And they both said, without even thinking about it, I want a stiff joint, because I want to explode when I have to hit that ball, which is exactly right. So if I have muscle stiffness on both sides of my joint, I have a safe reactive joint that is going to be extremely athletic. If I work on being loose, I just screwed myself up.
That's a really important thing for, us as pickleballers to think about when we talk about dynamic warm-ups. A lot of times individuals will just go on the court and, we'll dink around, we'll just hit right over the net, but that's only warming up dinking. And a lot of our injuries don't often come just when we're dinking. They're coming when we're running back across the court to try to save that ball that got lobbed, or when, we're going for those long strokes from the baseline. And that's where we start getting shoulder and elbow issues. Like Rhett is saying, think about dynamically warming up all of these motions that you're expecting to engage in when you're playing pickleball or whatever other sport that you're also into. Because I know that, many of us have additional sports and activities we like to get into as well. Just to recap so far, a couple things to encourage to think about is don't just stretch for stretching's sake. Stay active with your warm-ups and make sure that you're getting those muscles turned on and strong and stable in the ranges that you're about to be using them. And consider those aspects on your function more so than just focusing on where you're feeling pain or where you're feeling that tightness. And more often than not, we want that stiffness, we want that stability, as opposed to being loosey-goosey and bendy. And even if you consider, gymnasts, they are seen as, oh, they're so flexible, but many times they're also training to have strength in those extreme ranges of motion when they're performing these great feats. They aren't only stretching for stretching's sake. And the ones that, are only stretching, they oftentimes will end up getting hurt because they're not able to get those final ranges of motion or those specific ranges of motion that they're training. And so, we've said it before on the podcast, and I'll say it again, we are athletes as we are playing the sport, even if it's just recreational or even if you're competitive. Just keep those factors in mind when you're thinking about how to take care of your body for this sport. With that in mind, Rhett, what are some things that you would encourage the listeners to start incorporating aside from dynamic warm-ups, or maybe some specific additional activities that maybe they don't think about? Or what are some questions that they should be asking their healthcare providers if they go seek some additional guidance from professionals?
So one of the things that I just thought of as you were talking is,
please, love it.
It's just as important to cool down as it is to warm up. So your pickleball players, could be going out there and playing a rigorous game of pickleball. It's hot, they're sweating, they're getting dehydrated. So all of that stuff is what feeds into those muscles turning off on their own.
Mm-hmm.
The way you restart those muscles so they don't get stiff, you're not sore the next day, you recover faster, is to redo your active warm-up as your cool down. So when I give patients active warm-up and cool down, I want to get them through that in 5 to 10 minutes. That's it.
Right.
So when I work with high school football teams, I can warm up 100 high school football players in less than 10 minutes. So if I can do that, you can warm up as a pickleball player and then cool down as a pickleball player, so that by the time you get home, you're not all stiff and sore. And then you're like, oh, this takes forever to warm up the next day. Well, it's taking forever to warm up because you didn't cool down. So when those muscles are working, they end up getting fatigued. And if you just go sit down in your car to drive home, as soon as those muscles get a short position, they're going to get stuck because they're inhibited. Now, if you taught them how to lengthen and shorten under tension before you sat down, the likelihood of your soreness would decrease.
Right.
So that would be one big thing. I think it's a great topic that you brought up. What should you be asking medical providers? So if you do get an injury, how do you find a qualified medical provider? Just because somebody is certified in something doesn't mean they're the top guy. So those two golfers that I just saw, they were working with the top athletic trainers and physical therapists in the PGA that are their top doctors, their top therapists, TPI certified, all these certifications. They did a lousy job of assessment. They did a horrible job of treatment, which is why these guys were hurt in the first place. So don't just go to somebody because they say I'm certified in something. So the really hard thing for a consumer is to figure out who's good by looking at a website or looking at Yelp reviews. The things that you don't care about as a consumer is how nice their front desk is. My front desk is really nice, but when you ask people why they come here, they don't say because it's easy to schedule at the front desk. They say because I get results. So you want to talk to people that are actually getting results. And when they start telling about, all this great stuff that their physical therapist did, ask them, how did you feel 3 hours after you saw the physical therapist? How did you feel the day after? How often do you have to go? If you have to go 2 to 3 times a week for 4 to 6 weeks, you're seeing somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So you might go twice in 1 week, then once the next week, then once a month later. That means they're giving you results and they're teaching you how to do things on your own so you don't have to be coming back. So those are the things that you want to be looking for. Unfortunately, with the therapists that I've been training, athletic trainers that I've trained, chiropractors, they've come back to me and said, we don't want to be called physical therapists anymore. We're tired of being tossed into this bucket of physical therapy because everybody knows it doesn't work. Why are we calling ourselves that when we don't do that? We want to call ourselves 180 practitioners. So that's what we're going to be doing. If you want to find a 180 practitioner, you can go to my website. They're all listed on there.
Wonderful.
New York, California, there's a couple overseas. So you can look on there. So hopefully, and my inference is that those numbers are going to be growing exponentially. We'll get more people that are 180 providers instead of physical therapists, and we can help all of you pickleballers out.
Yes. And it's exciting to know that there is a group of people, a movement that is trying to redefine and rebrand what is truly healthcare and wellness and fitness. And to have the opportunity to, have a directory and look up on Rhett's website to see where these individuals are, get those questions answered, and be able to understand your body a whole lot better and keep up with the current evidence. It's so very, very valuable. Rhett, for the people that are wanting to follow along more with what you're doing and where they want to get in touch with you, aside from your website, where else can they find you?
Most of my content can be found on Instagram. My Instagram handle is the 180 System. So it's one spelled out. So the ONE, the number 8, the number 0, System, all one word. So that's where you can find the most content. Most of that content is geared towards practitioners, physical therapists, chiropractors, massage therapists to help you get out of the broken model. As I said, we're going to be pushing more. I'm trying to help our practitioners out. So there will be a new Instagram page coming soon that will be geared towards patients, more patient education on patient level versus practitioner level. So stay tuned for that.
We love it. And I'm excited to see that too. Is there anything else that you want to offer to the pickleball general public that you wish, they had more understanding or more knowledge about, aside from, all the value you've given with dynamic warm-ups and dynamic cool downs and asking questions and knowing you have, every right to make your choice with the provider that you're wanting to work with?
I just encourage you guys to keep on playing and listen to your body. Your body will tell you when there's something wrong. If you cover that up and try to just keep on moving forward, your body will tell you again, something is still wrong. So that's where you got to go find somebody. And I can't remember what the second part of your question was.
Oh, just, anything that you would like the general public to be considering and to have on the forefront of their minds as they continue to play pickleball and promote their prevention and recovery.
Yep. I guess the other thing would be injuries don't have to happen. Pain doesn't have to be part of your game. If you are implementing good thought processes and good thinking strategies before and after you play, and you're finding the right people to listen to, hang out with, conversate with, then those injuries and pain don't need to limit what you're doing.
Absolutely. And the biggest blessing from all of that is, just having the knowledge and knowing what is actually the root of the problem, getting clarity on that and getting actual strategies and applying techniques that actually work. You don't have to be afraid if you ever do experience injuries or symptoms or pain, because you can now understand and see the way out of it to keep enjoying your game.
Yep.
So,
and just to continue on that thought process, ask questions.
Yes.
And when you think you get a weird answer, ask more questions. And if your coach, your physical therapist, your trainer, whatever, can't answer your questions, find somebody else. So I encourage my patients to grill me, push me, try to figure out everything that I'm thinking about, because I can explain everything that I'm doing because it all comes back to science. Things get shaky and you can't explain what you're doing when you're telling people about trigger points and increasing the circulation with cups and tapes are going to stabilize your joint. That stuff isn't going to hold water. And if you keep on asking those people questions, they're going to finally break down and say, I don't know.
So don't be afraid to ask questions, and a real good practitioner who doesn't know, they will find the answer or direct you to someone who does know. And that's something that I'm really grateful for in the community that I've been able to join, that Rhett and I were able to connect with, is there's tons of us practitioners that are searching for the people who we can direct our patients to if we don't know the answer, as we're also learning the answer. So thank you so much, Dr. Rhett Polka, for coming on to the Pickleball Physio podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sarah. It was a lot of fun doing this.
Awesome. Well, we'll hopefully have you on again. But until then, pickleballers, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys on the courts.